Welcome everyone to the 2016 GEICO 500 at Talladega race review, where I recap what went on before the race, during the race, and after the race, looking ahead to the following race. So, what are my overall thoughts on this race? Well, the best, if I had to describe the race in one word, it would be unbelievable. We had some crazy action, both in the racing and in the many wrecks that we saw. And it was, and I felt like that it was also a very competitive super speed race, because I felt like the last few have not exactly been as competitive. Where usually like the big teams or one driver gets out front and is able to pretty much just dominate the race. But that wasn't really the case this time around. We saw we definitely did see familiar names up front, like Keselowski, who went on to win the race, and not Kenseth, Joe Logano, and maybe a few others. But then we saw newer faces up front, like Trevor Bayne. Like, this was like impossible. I think that this was the first race where I honestly saw Trevor Bayne as a legit contender to win the race, and I think many others would agree with me. Kyle Larson was running good, and he isn't exactly the best plate racer. So one of the top stories that came early in the week after Richmond was NASCAR goes back to mandating that everyone puts on 5 lug nuts, and if anyone doesn't have 5 lugs in a post inspection, you could be in for some serious consequences. The crew chief could be suspended, a hefty fine, and I think I even read from Bob Pockrass saying that that if the winning car doesn't have all 5 lug nuts tight, it could even result in their chase ticket being taken away. I think NASCAR made the right move, but I think they did come down with some serious or just simply too harsh of consequences. Also, Tony Stewart's fine stayed, which really is once again dumb, because basically by changing the rule after Tony Stewart made the statement and NASCAR fined him, basically NASCAR did actually listen to Tony Stewart, but the fine's still going to stay, which is just once again ridiculous. Also in this race, I think I might have talked about it last week, but I'll bring it up again. After the first caution, Tony Stewart got out of the car, and Ty Dillon would get back in the car. They rehearsed this in practice. But one interesting news that came out is that if Ty Dillon had won the race, the win would go to Tony Stewart, because Tony Stewart did start the race, and thus it would count toward him making the chase if he can make the top 3 in points. Now this isn't a new thing. In fact, it's actually one of those rules that NASCAR under Brian France's leadership hasn't touched at all. And it has happened before where a fill-in driver did win the race. For example, in the 2007 Xfinity Milwaukee race, Eric Almirola started the race. Then at some point in the race, Denny Hamlin got in the car and actually went on to win the race. But it wasn't. But the win did go to Eric Almirola. So it has happened before. And as far as that win still counting, I think it hurts the credibility and integrity of the system if you can make the chase. If a driver can make the chase without actually winning the race. So I think that's a rule that needs to be looked at in the future, especially if we're going to have the current chase format. Nick Sandler was fined $20,000 and suspended for this race because the steering wheel was not in the right spot after Richmond. That's like the simplest way of describing it. Mike Kelly was the crew chief. Also, Dover is getting rid of the guardrail it had in turn span 4 and putting safer barriers up, so that's a good thing. And I don't have this in my notes, but I did check in the fact that Dover got rid of 3 pit stalls and widened its pit stalls to 40 to obviously because there's now 40 cars. in the spring. There's now only 40 cars that could show up in the Sprint Cup Series, and Dover was notorious for having tight pit stalls, and I guess it'll be a good thing for the drivers and crew chiefs, but I guess it'll kind of take away something that was unique about Dover. Now let's get to the weekend. Jamie McMurray was fastest in practice. Joe Logano was fastest in happy hour. Both of these happened on Friday. And then Chase Elliott scored his second career pole on Saturday, followed by Austin Dillon. So the 24 and 3 started first and second. Dale Earnhardt Jr., Matt Kenseth, Jimmy Johnson, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., Brian Kozlowski, Danny Hamlin, Carl Edwards, Paul Menard, Casey Kane, and Mark Truex Jr. Rounded out the top 12. Josh Wise missed the field. And as far as any other notables in the field, David Gilliland made his first start of the season. He did not make the Daytona 500, and Michael Walter drove the 55 instead of Reed Sorensen. But I think that this was probably the most interesting story that I didn't have to do with the racing this weekend, and that was Brian France attended a drivers' council meeting for the first time ever. The drivers' council has been a thing for almost a year now. Yet this past Friday night, Brian France, who is the CEO of NASCAR, attended one, and I think that this was a huge milestone in NASCAR and in the drivers' council. Brian France should, I think, be more involved. Brian France should be more involved with what's going on in the garage, because he's already rarely ever at the racetrack, and it causes him to be out of touch if you listen or watch any of his interviews. So I think this is a good thing. And what was mostly talked about was 2016 and 2017 stuff. It'll be interesting to see if any possible changes happen in NASCAR because of that drivers' council meeting. One of the biggest surprises in the race, and this was a surprise in not a good fashion, was Dale Earnhardt Jr. Now, he wasn't really exactly good winning material. He started third and was up front for the opening laps, but then once he started falling back, he was just never able to recover. And then things got even worse, where after we're at around lap 50, Dale Earnhardt Jr. got arrow loose, a lot like at Daytona, but this time he collected other cars. He turned back to the right, trying to save the car, and went up in front of Casey Kane and Matt Tovetto, who both drivers were having good runs up until then. Then he went behind the wall, got the car fixed, and then much later in the race, I want to say maybe at around somewhere between lap 110 and lap 120, maybe a little sooner than that. Dale Jr. was at the tail end of the lead pack, and Carl Edwards, who got involved in a crash that they're going to see later. Carl Edwards had a right front tire go down, or something broke in the car, and went right up in front of Dale Earnhardt Jr. Entering turn 1, both drivers went into the outside wall hard, and Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s car actually caught on fire. So Dale Earnhardt Jr. would I think he finished dead last. So definitely a very unusual day for a driver who has won at this track 6 times, including 1 year ago. Like I said earlier in this video, one of the reasons that I consider this race to be unbelievable was just the crazy action. And by crazy action, I mean crazy wrecks. Now let's start at the beginning. Just past the halfway point, green flag, we were in the middle of green flag pit stops. A few drivers had already had to come down the pit road, and so there were 4 wide right here. McMurray was just getting a little too high. Austin Dillon had to go up, and then he had nowhere to go, or Gillen had nowhere to go. Austin Dillon hit the wall. Johnson spun around. Watch Chris Buescher right here. He gets hit by Michael Annett and tumbles 3 times. Give her this advertisement. And thankfully, he landed back on his wheels. And thankfully, Chris Buescher was okay. Michael Annett actually took a pretty hard impact into the inside wall. Does it show it? It misses her. Oh, here it is. Johnson also had an incredible save. And this is also the same crash where Carl Edwards got his damage, and there's the hard impact into the inside wall for Michael Annett, driver's side. Now, the big one, 29 laps to go. What happened was Jimmy Johnson got pushed from Busch, and it was too much of a push. It got him into Menard, and then they spun right in front of the rest of the pack, and the rest is history, pretty much. A total of 17. Some reports had 17 cars, others had 21 cars. It really just depends on what considers being involved in a wreck is. But a lot of big names and drivers that had strong cars got involved in that wreck. And even though this was the biggest wreck of the race, I don't think anyone actually DNF'd from this race. They all were able to get back onto the racetrack. And I also gotta say, some of these drivers had great record points. Like, I think Kyle Busch got a piece of it, but other than that, he came out unscathed. Landon Castle, Clint Boyer, Ty Dillon, Eric Almirola. Yeah, they all had great record points. Now, this was by far the craziest crash the whole race long. So with 8 laps to go, and I would like to inform you that what happened before. What happened before this? They actually almost wrecked when Matt Kenseth got forced down below the yellow line by Joe Logano. That really shuffled the field, and I thought that was going to be a big wreck. But then they decided to wait until 8 laps to go, and right here, Dan Patrick, just like with Jimmy Johnson, gets too much of a push with Michael McDowell, hits Matt Kenseth, and Kenseth just goes over Dan Patrick, goes into the inside wall very hard. Kenseth lands back on the wheels, and Matt Kenseth's misfortune continues. But my goodness, that was by far possibly the craziest. It wasn't the craziest wreck, but definitely one of the craziest wrecks I've seen in a long time. And Kenseth's roof flaps did deploy, but it wasn't enough. He was just too fast and was already in the air. But certainly, I think last time we saw a blowover like that was Clint Boyer in the Budweiser duel back in 2014. I think that's the last time we saw a blowover like that. Also, other strong drivers got involved in this, like Joe Logano, and Daniel Patrick said that it was the hardest hit she ever took. And she actually, when she went to the medical center, they actually did an X-ray on her chest, I believe, because there were concerns about broken ribs. But there were no broken ribs or anything like that, and so Jack Patrick will be able to continue. Now, the final wreck, coming off turn number 4. As drivers are trying to get whatever position they can make, you're going to see Kevin Harvick here get spun right there, and he just goes hard into the outside wall. They're already wrecking, and on the instant replay, Truex, Allmendinger, Stenhouse all got involved in that. So what happened was, what happened here was Landon Castle tried to go in between Cole Witt and Kevin Harvick. That did not work. There wasn't enough room, and Kevin Harvick just goes head on into the outside wall, ends up on his side, so he almost slipped as well. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. Allmendinger get collected. Martrix Jr. almost had that miss, but Cole Witt came right up in front of him, and that right there is all of the crazy crashes that happened. And there were even more. And there was even a crazy crash earlier in the race when Michael Waltrip stayed out. And got hit in the wrong angle by Martrix Jr. He actually was then all the way down on the flat apron in turns 3 and 4. Came back up onto the racetrack, and he saved the car, but Casey Mears ended up getting torn up, and Eric Almirola went for a spin, and so that was also a pretty crazy crash. One thing that I certainly think is going to be talked about heading into Kansas, and even if this race did happen, I think it was going to be talked about anyway. But what happened today at Talladega just fueled the fire. Joe Logano versus Matt Kenseth once again. Now, back in January, Matt Kenseth and Logano both said that they put what happened last fall behind them. But once again here at Talladega, the two of them made contact, and even though both drivers got involved in the second big one, it once again created a fire between these two drivers. Now, compared to what happened last fall, Kansas, Martinsville, I don't think anything was intentional. But I certainly think that Matt Kenseth felt like that he was done wrong with Joe Logano, because I think he thought that Logano purposely forced him onto the yellow line, or just simply he thinks that Logano didn't make a smart decision, which then caused him to be far enough back in the field where he would eventually flip over and thus get that finish. And it's kind of fitting that that these two meet again, because next week we're heading to Kansas, where it all started. There are two debates that I'm seeing brought up by media members and fans, and the first one is restrictor plate racing too dangerous? I could go back and forth on this. I both love and hate the racing, but really, racing is dangerous. Period. Regardless of what track it is. We've seen violent crashes at short tracks, which are the slowest type of tracks. So I think that racing is dangerous, and I think that it's not exactly fair to just simply say that racing is the only dangerous type of racing, and all the other racing at other types of tracks is fine. And the second debate is, should there be any changes after today's race? It's really hard to tell. As far as the flips, though, both flips happened due to contact, and I don't know what you can really do about that. Certainly, NASCAR has made a lot of great safety improvements. For example, the safety barriers and these cars. I think the worst injury any driver suffered was bruises. So I think we definitely have come a long way when you look at what used to be top safety to now today's top safety. But I don't think there should be. I just don't think there should be any changes as far as of me recording, and that's how I think about it as of me recording this video. So now let's wrap up Talladega and look ahead to Kansas. So final thoughts on Talladega. I'll say it once again: wild race. I think certainly one that's going to be remembered for at least quite some time, mostly due to the wild action and chaos we saw in that race. As far as my thoughts on Brad Keselowski winning it, I'm not exactly that surprised to see Brad Keselowski win, because this is now his fourth career win at Talladega, second all time, and so I think it's safe to say that Keselowski has a really good grasp at restrictor plate racing, but especially Talladega. And I think by the time we get to Daytona in July and Talladega in October, one note that I think everyone's going to have to take is, do not let Brad Keselowski get the lead, because once Keselowski got the lead, he was pretty much untouchable. And now we can look ahead to Kansas, and I have this love and hate relationship with Kansas Speedway. Because I don't think it deserves 2 dates, and there certainly have been its dull moments, but at the same time, it certainly has proven to be a good track in recent times, because you can race up high, you can race down low, thanks to the progressive baking. The groove is now widened out from the bottom to top, which we really did not really see a whole lot in 2012, 2013, 2014 after the repay, but now it's white out. And last year in October, the battle between Matt Kenseth and Joe Logano late in the race, before Logano spun on Matt Kenseth, that was some of the best racing we had all of 2015. So I think the chances of a good race at Kansas are likely, but we're just gonna have to see it. As far as the favorite for Kansas, Jimmy Johnson has the best average finish and won there in the main race 1 year ago. And even though he had a bad finish at Talladega, and really his first bad finish of the year, Carl Edwards, I think he still has some momentum off of his back-to-back wins at Bristol and Richmond. I think he could be good. As far as any surprises, who could be a surprise? Kyle Larson in his 4 races, he has done pretty good there. Top 5 and 3 top 10s, including a second place back in October 2014. So Kyle Larson could be a surprise. But other than that, I really don't really know. I mean, I'm certain we're going to see other GDR cars up front, and maybe and likely even the Penske cars, but we're just going to see. Ever since it got repaid in the summer of 2012, since then we definitely have seen wild moments, and you weren't exactly, and we've had races where you weren't exactly where you weren't exactly certain who was going to win because they were so wild. I don't know if this upcoming Saturday night race is going to be like one of those races, but you never know. It's NASCAR. Anything can happen. And with that, I'm now going to end this race review. So thank you all for watching. Be sure to rate, comment, subscribe, and bye.